Welcome to Undercurrents. We have some breaking news here. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been confirmed as the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. This is a massive job that oversees a lot of the federal health bureaucracy, and that means a lot of federal health policy. So we're going to get into all of that. Make sure to subscribe here on the channel, wherever you're downloading your podcasts, and of course, over at undercurrents.tv, join the Undercurrents community and have a full premium membership. We appreciate that so much. Let's get into the news. Mitch McConnell, once again, was the only Republican senator who voted against the confirmation of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You'll remember it was the exact same tally, 52 to 48, for Tulsi Gabbard to be confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence just yesterday. Mitch McConnell, once again, was the sole Republican who voted against Tulsi Gabbard. And in this case, McConnell put out quite an interesting statement. Chad Pergram of Fox got this right away. He said at the end of the statement, it's pretty long, he references, McConnell does, that he's a survivor of childhood polio. He says, in my lifetime, I've watched vaccines save millions of lives from devastating diseases across America and the world. I will not condone the relitigation of proven cures, and neither will millions of Americans who credit their survival and quality of life to scientific miracles. And I want to go fast forward to the very last sentence of this long statement. McConnell, after voting against RFK Jr., said, quote, "As he takes office, I sincerely hope Mr. Kennedy will choose not to sow further doubt and division, but to restore trust in our public health institutions." The reason I want to focus on that sentence in particular is that I find it to be, I was going to say duplicitous, but I actually don't even think that Mitch McConnell is conceiving of it this way. The contradiction in this sentence and in this statement from a August Republican senator is glaring. He's saying he doesn't want RFK Jr. to sow distrust but restore public health. Well, one of the ways to restore trust in public health institutions is actually to show how distrustful they have been and how we should be doubtful of prior iterations of HHS. And the most obvious evidence for that in the world is the rate of obesity in the United States and the increase over decades. So yes, it is absolutely essential to restoring trust in our public health institutions to continue sowing doubt and distrust, because there's so much to be doubtful and distrustful of. And if people can't even begin with that premise to say something is disastrous in this status quo, it doesn't mean you have to go after vaccines. For Robert F. Kennedy Jr., maybe it does, but he has given the way he was able to get confirmed. In fact, we know from Senators Bill Cassidy and Lisa Murkowski, who announced she would vote for Mitch McConnell just yesterday, a very moderate Republican from Alaska. He has given them assurances that he's basically not going to touch vaccine programs. Obviously, those were not enough for Mitch McConnell, even though they were enough for his colleagues. Bill Cassidy is actually a doctor, but it wasn't enough for Mitch McConnell. He let all of his colleagues take the arrows on this so that he could, take a ceremonial vote against RFK Jr. now that he no longer wants to be the leader of Republicans in the Senate. So I think that last statement really says it all about where Republicans have come from. This idea that the status quo is necessary to preserve. It's obviously a reflex among conservatives, right? You sort of have the Chesterton's fence dilemma, that when you come across a fence, the liberal is the person who tears the fence down, and the conservative is the person who asks why the fence is there. So it's a reflex for conservatives to want to defend the status quo. But I think conservatives now see the status quo. In fact, I know conservatives now see the status quo as something that accumulated, an order that accumulated over a course of decades of dominance from left-leaning gatekeepers. And that's why I want to just show this picture that Donald Trump Jr. posted right after Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a lifelong Democrat, somebody who was actually supported once by Barack Obama as a potential candidate for his head of his EPA. He is now The Secretary of HHS in Donald Trump, another longtime Democrat turned Republican in his presidential administration, and had the support of basically the entire Republican Senate, from moderates like Susan Collins to hardcore establishment conservatives like a James Lankford, establishment Republicans, to MAGA conservatives like Tommy Tuberville. And so you have this picture here with Donald Trump Jr. flanked by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, the former vice chair of the Democratic Party, and he's saying promises made, promises kept. Next up, Kash Patel, because just before Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was confirmed, Kash Patel made it out of committee, which means he is now going to the full Senate floor for a vote. And that's coming up very, very soon. And Kash Patel, of all those people, he's not a Democrat. He's someone, though, who is opposed to the institution that he's about to take over. And that is to say, he's opposed to the status quo of the institution that he's about to take over. So it'll be an interesting vote. But Democrats, what's interesting about Kash Patel from that realignment perspective that we're talking about here is it used to be a left-wing talking point to say that the FBI was abusing its surveillance powers. And now it's become something that Democrats defend. And in opposing RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, Bernie Sanders, we talked about this on the show yesterday. Bernie Sanders voted for Marco Rubio, but not Tulsi Gabbard, who actually endorsed his presidential campaign and took so much flack for making that endorsement back in 2016. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He voted for Marco Rubio, but not for RFK Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard, two, I would say, friendly people to the Democratic Socialist cause. But they've become sort of culture war litmus tests. And because of that, Democrats really look like they are defending and digging in on the status quo in public health, which everyone knows from the most 30,000-foot view perspective is a disaster in the country right now, and on intelligence, which, again, this is a very low institutional trust society, and because that institutional trust is low, the politics of this for Democrats are really, really brutal. You can say the same thing about their reflexive posturing against the DOJ efforts against waste, fraud, and abuse. We've covered here a lot. All of the various conflicts of interest that Elon Musk has and the concerns about oligarchy, understood, totally understood. At the same time, if you're going to oppose all of this, just categorically, you end up looking like defenders of the status quo, which basically nobody in the public is happy with right now. So all that is to say, this is pretty powerful for Republicans. You can think that they're cranks, whatever. But I just wanted to go back really briefly to a report that I had back in the fall over Mitch McConnell, just because I don't think a lot of this context is being given for why he's taking these ceremonial votes. I say ceremonial because he knows that they don't matter. If they did matter, that would be another question. If, for example, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski weren't voting for RFK Jr., how Mitch McConnell voted, I think, would be different, because he still wants to have some fundraising power and all of that. A source told me back in the fall, quote, a senior source, he still has tremendous power, McConnell does. Cult of personality power and technical power through the Appropriations Committee and the Rules Committee. He's not slinking back into the Borg by any means. And he has spent his first month of post-leader life at the time publicly opposing Trump's America First foreign policy, working against his nominees behind the scenes, and scolding Republicans that funding the war in Ukraine should be their top priority. And I think that context is really interesting because McConnell has used his period after Senate leadership to put himself still in very powerful positions, even though he's ailing. Clearly, you can see it. He froze up at a press conference very memorably. He keeps falling. He's in a wheelchair. All of that, he's clinging to power because he believes that the status quo is worth defending from the reformers like Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And of course, you can support reform without supporting their versions of reform. They're pretty hardcore, understood. But that's what Republican voters, the people that Mitch McConnell represents in Kentucky, that's what they voted for. And obviously, he's supposed to represent the interests of his constituents, but that's become increasingly difficult for Mitch McConnell, who seems more interested in sort of thwarting acting as a bulwark in the upper chamber against the surge of populism that is really embodied in the takeover of the Republican Party. That you have every Republican senator except McConnell supporting Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. and Kash Patel, who is an opponent of corruption at the FBI. It's not something Republicans wanted to talk about for years, obviously until it came for Donald Trump. So much of this is symbolic. It'll mean a lot of substantive. Obviously, it will mean a lot of substantive things likely at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, at the FBI, at if Kash Patel is confirmed, and at Health and Human Services, even though Kennedy seems to have given many concessions to Republicans not to touch vaccines. We'll see. A lot of this is TBD. We don't know how they'll govern these institutions, but they are reformers. That much is for sure. So the symbolism is powerful for now. The substance will be powerful to come, and we will be here covering all of it on Undercurrents. So make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you back here with more soon.